we did reach out to the enforcement authorities in Edo State, and they did not respond to the messages. But we'll keep trying and hope to get their perspective on the matter moving forward. But still talking about this vaccine, anti-vaxxers, and the surrounding attendant circumstances, we've got Dr. Nesochi Okeke-Igbokwe, who is a physician and a health expert. He joins us via Zoom from New York. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well, as a physician, how does that sound to you when you hear this kinds of narrative making the rounds, vaccine mandate?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me. So as a physician, I am hearing a lot of what your guest was talking about from even my patients here in the States. Here's the concern that patients have. I think the issue is not having a lot of the information at hand regarding what benefits vaccinations actually afford any individual. So when you want to put things in perspective, the majority of deaths from COVID-19 that are occurring worldwide are mostly occurring amongst those who are unvaccinated. I think when we're talking about this potential mandate to vaccinate those in Edo State and Nigeria, it's a complicated issue. Why? Because first and foremost, you have to determine, has the government made enough access to these vaccinations for the general public that they would want vaccinations to occur for? And the next thing that one needs to determine, has the general public been educated enough about vaccinations and the benefit of being vaccinated? I think most of those who are hesitant at this point about vaccinations, they're believing perhaps their human rights or their liberties are basically being infringed upon, but they're not really understanding the greater picture, the big picture. We've been in this pandemic situation for quite some time now, and at this point, we want to kind of normalize things and get back to our normal lives. Things are not going to get back to any sense of normalcy until we get a majority of the population vaccinated. Currently, at this point in Nigeria, there's a very low rate of vaccination. So I think the first step is really educating upon the need and the benefits for vaccines, allowing the public to understand how these vaccinations work, and allowing them to understand that these vaccinations are both safe and they work. They protect you from potentially dying. Anyone who gets this vaccination, the COVID-19 vaccination, basically it lowers the threshold, it lowers the ability of COVID-19 to potentially kill you. We all want to live, we want to move forward with our lives. So at this point, the best way forward is to vaccinate.
You know, how do we reconcile this? Because even in Europe, South America, North America, we've seen this wave of anti-vaxxers protesting where you think they've got a lot more information, they've got improved healthcare facility, but you still had that process. So how do we reconcile that?
Here's the thing, there's a lot of vaccine misinformation going on at this point. So if you are somebody that's at home sitting out there trying to figure out, are vaccinations the way forward for me? Is this something that I need to have to basically help me get through this pandemic situation? I would say speak to a doctor, speak to a medical doctor, speak to a medical expert to really get the facts. A lot of the times my patients, some of my patients here in the States that are even hesitant about vaccines, I'll have consultations with them just to even discuss with them the benefits and the need for vaccinations and how it can help their lives positively during this pandemic situation. So at the forefront of it all, education is key. Getting the facts are key. There's way too much misinformation out there that leads some of the population to believe that this vaccine is not good, it's dangerous, it's some kind of poison of sorts. I've heard so many basically false things about vaccinations that patients read on the internet. And bottom line is the sources that they have are just not accurate. I think if most Nigerians have the information in front of them, there would not even be a need for a mandate to begin with. I think most people, if they have the facts in front of them, they would want to have the vaccine without anyone imposing any kind of mandate about getting vaccinated. Education, facts, information, that's a powerful tool, and that's just key at this point in the pandemic.
I think one of the issues Mr. Edokpai raised is, why does it appear as though the government is forcing this down the throat, the jab down the arm of people, perhaps? And I think that's been a challenge. So which do you think works? Is it just information, more information, and more information? Or there still needs to be some form of coercing, some form of, if you don't do this, then you don't get access to this. Do you think that works, especially in this case, in the overall scheme of things?
I mean, in the overall scheme of things, when you've provided the general public with the facts and they're still hesitant or they don't want to move forward with it, unfortunately, regulatory bodies, government bodies, they have no choice but to put this mandate out there. No one is being forced, but the message being relayed is stating that if you are not vaccinated, guess what? You're not going to have access to some of these public spaces that you are used to having access to. So if you want to continue moving around and having these the access to these public spaces, then please, by all means, get vaccinated. Why? Because you're protecting yourself, you're protecting others. When we continue to have this argument from the side that says this is an infringement upon my human rights, upon my civil rights, yes, it's your body, it's your choice whether or not to vaccinate. However, should you be able to potentially give somebody else a deadly infection that can kill them? I think if we want to do what's best for the country, what's best for the global community, we realize that vaccinations really are the way forward.
If I could just jump in there, but
sure.
When even those who are vaccinated, I mean, there's been several reports, and you could correct that if it's wrong, that although they've been vaccinated, they can still transmit the vaccine to those who were not vaccinated. I mean, transmit the virus.
I understand what you're saying, but what you're referring to is what we're calling breakthrough infections. There are cases of those who are fully vaccinated. However, they're still having infections with COVID-19. But I think we have to understand what the key point is. At this point in the pandemic, where there are all these variants, like the Delta variant surging, here's what you have to understand. If you are vaccinated, let's say you did get a breakthrough infection, guess what? The potential for you to die from that infection has been markedly reduced. When you look at the data globally, in the States, in Nigeria, those that are dying predominantly from COVID-19 are those that have not been vaccinated. So you would want to vaccinate so that you are protecting your life in the event of a potential COVID-19 infection. And that's really the bottom line at this point.
I mean, in terms of messaging now, because I think that has also been a major issue. So you say, governments are not exactly forcing people, but on the, same vein, you say, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you can access, major things like perhaps a hospital, you can go to stores and the rest. Isn't that one and the same? Forcing people in another way, or you think the messaging needs to change? Because I think for Mr. Edokpai as well, he says it's the same thing, saying that people, yes, they don't have to get vaccinated, but if they need to come to work, which by the way earns them their pay, they need to get vaccinated. So is it a challenge of messaging, or at the end of the day, we're still saying the same thing? You must get vaccinated.
Messaging is really key. Messaging is really crucial. But at the end of the day, the underlying message that I think everyone is trying to relay is that everyone wants to stay as healthy as possible and preserve their lives during this pandemic. And that's just all there is to it. We need to give everyone the opportunity to really understand what COVID-19 is, to really understand the facts about vaccinations. I think with time, when any individual actually gets the facts, gets the information that's necessary, I don't believe that there would even be this need for a mandate, because people will just want to naturally get it. The information is powerful. Once you have the information at hand, I don't think that many people would say that I don't want this vaccination that can help save my life if I had this serious infection.
You
So I
know,
think the government
yeah.
gets to a point whereby they have to do what is best for the general community to try to keep everyone as safe as possible. So I think it's a move in the direction to try to keep citizens of the country safe and healthy.
You know, that appears to be where the bone of contention is, because there's a school of thought that suggests or believes that trying to compel people to take this has proven counterproductive, because they say, look at the protest, the wave of protest in Europe. As a matter of fact, it now spread to a lot more people, and they thought it makes them all the more suspicious as to allowing it just flow naturally. So does that come across as though, well, government is, what they say, in a straight betwixt two here?
Yeah, I mean, again, the issue comes down to the information and giving the public the time to digest the information. But I think the government is put in a difficult position after you've given the public enough time to digest a lot of this information, but you're still at a standstill on the vaccination rates. You're still at a point whereby there are these upticks of infections, and basically there's no end in sight to the pandemic. So what else is left to do but to put in some of these mandates to kind of guide folks in the right direction to actually keep them healthy?
So I'm seeing the vaccination rates in the US, 55% fully vaccinated. Well, way more have gotten their first dose, but fully vaccinated, you have 55%. So clearly, you still have a challenge on your hands. And I mean, you expect that a lot of people have access to information. Still, they choose to stick to their guns, as it were. Do you see this being resolved in the future? Because, I mean, we've had some time, as it were, to still get a lot of information. In fact, you have scientists who are on the front lines, as it were, still saying, well, I'm still skeptical about this. So do you think this is a conversation we'll probably keep having, I mean, for the nearest foreseeable future or the farthest foreseeable future?
So this is an ongoing and evolving situation, this COVID pandemic world that we're living in. But anyone that's a part of the medical community, the scientific world, they're going to say, yes, move forward with vaccinations. But there are going to be those in the general public that, try as you might, they are not going to want to move forward with vaccinations. So what is my job and my responsibility as a doctor seeing patients during this pandemic? All I can really do is provide my patients with the answers to the questions that they have. I continue to notice that those who have been on edge or hesitant about getting vaccinations, they've just read something false or heard something that's just wrong online or from a wrong source. And once I've taken the time to actually give them some of the facts, some patients, have actually moved towards just wanting to get vaccinated after having a medical consultation to understand what the vaccine means, what a potential infection would mean for their lives and for their livelihood. So I think it's an evolving situation, and it's just going to take time. We still have those that will never want to get vaccinated, but we have to think about, again, the better and greater good for humanity, the better and greater good for the citizens of Nigeria, the better and greater good for the international community. And that's what's key at this point, keeping us all safe and healthy moving forward, so we can hopefully have an end in sight at some point.
I'd like you to talk about, respond, if you would, to the elephant in the room. Some who see this as, just a precursor to one world government, the end of the world. I'm sure you have heard that. How have you responded to that? Because I imagine your patients also perhaps share that, mindset or that viewpoint. Is that something you subscribe to as well? How do you, respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's something that I started to hear in the beginning of the pandemic from patients. This is the end of the world in sight, what is going on. But guess what? Every period of time, there is an issue with basically having the surge of a new kind of infection, a new illness that really hits the global community quite hard. And for us, it was this, or it is, this COVID-19 pandemic, this infection that's been really harming so many people worldwide. So what I let patients know that it's always an evolving situation with science. This pandemic that we're having, guess what? It's not going to be the last pandemic we have. There's going to be something else in the future that occurs. But I think the importance is learning from the past and knowing how to move forward best in the future. So there are lessons learned that we know from past pandemics. And basically, science continues to tell us that what we need to do is really help the population get vaccinated so that we can move forward with our lives. And hopefully, when the next pandemic comes, when it's something new, when it's something different, we are all prepared and know what to do to kind of thrive in the world.
Oh, just one more thing before we go.
Sure.
Part of the conversation that will happen at the United Nations General Assembly today will be vaccine equity. And we know Africa is struggling. We get over 90% of our vaccines, we import all of those. What do you see happening with this virus and vaccination? Is it going to be a yearly thing moving forward? Because, some countries still take the flu jab, the Spanish flu. What do you see happening now? What would your advice be to Africa?
So advice to Africa really is be open-minded about vaccinations, really listen and follow what the studies and the data show us. We don't know how long, honestly, we're going to have COVID-19 around with us. But just looking forward in regards to the future of the pandemic, we may be in a situation whereby this virus may be with us for some time, and you will need that vaccine annually. At this point in the States, we're already here talking about COVID boosters, those that are fully vaccinated, who's going to need a booster shot at this point to continue to have that protection against COVID-19. We really don't know when there's going to be an end in sight. But with that said, you have to really think about how you're going to be able to move forward in this pandemic world, if the pandemic is going on indefinitely, to keep your body, your family as healthy and as safe as possible. So my advice is, if you have questions, ask a healthcare professional, ask your doctor, listen to the data, listen to good sources, and really understand what the benefits are of vaccinations. Really understand that there's a potential and a possibility, though that we don't want to hear this, that this pandemic, the world that we live in right now, it can be like this. Things can be like this for some time. So we need to be able to adjust and be malleable to all of these changes that are occurring all the time.
Then Dr. Nesochi Okeke-Ibukwe, a physician and a health expert, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.